All right, David Bidler, thank you so much for joining me. This is the Do Big Things podcast, and I'm excited to talk to you, man. Give us an intro. Tell us who you are.
Well, man, first off, huge amounts of gratitude for the opportunity to have the conversation. I'm really excited to chat with you. I love what you're doing. And I'm excited to just have a conversation on endurance training, and all the stuff that we've got going on here at the Distance Project. And the Distance Project is an endurance training center that we opened up about 6 years ago in Freeport, Maine. And we really worked to take a new approach to this idea of endurance training, and to ask the question, like, how long are we going for? Because endurance to me means let's go for a long time.
Yeah.
So we really try to build like durable athletes who can do this decade after decade and have a lot of fun playing in the mountains, and also hopefully build some principles that translate outside of sport.
Awesome. I love it. That's a feather in our cap here at Do Big Things podcast, and the company we're running, Big Things Crewing. We're just trying to get out there and help people do big things, whatever that looks like. If it's their first 5K, or they want to get outside and start walking, or they want to do their first ultramarathon, or join a martial arts gym, or whatever that looks like. It's different for everybody. So that's what we're all about here, man. So this is going to be cool.
Absolutely.
So the Distance Project. So is this a gym that you guys are running?
It's a gym, yeah.
Okay.
We opened it up. The Distance Project started in a parking lot at a YMCA. And we got a lot of people who were interested in just doing something really fun with their fitness and training hard together. And not only training hard together, but the goal of the Distance Project is to really build community, build relationships, build team. So we started a lot of our classes by asking interesting questions, bigger picture questions, sort of to the nature of your podcast, about why we're even doing this thing called fitness.
Okay.
What's the goal? What do we hope to get out of it? And to really get to know each other through the process. And the community formed around that. Some people were doing races. Some people were in the ultramarathon world. Other people were not runners at all. They were just really looking for probably some blend of physical fitness, mental fitness, and community.
Mm-hmm.
And when we looked at how powerful that trifecta could be, building our bodies, building our minds, and building connection, we thought it'd be really cool if we had an actual location to foster some of these relationships. So we took this, we rented this tiny little lawyer's office. And I still can't believe we got away with it, man. Like, it was like a 400 square foot lawyer's office next to a bunch of other quieter businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And we opened it up, and we ran it for the first year and brought people in to train, just like to your point, to train to do big things in their life. And for some people that meant some big ultramarathon race. For some people it just meant taking a hold of their ability to adapt on purpose again. We had a lot of people who were falling in love with movement again. Maybe they were athletes, and then they had children, and they sort of circled back to say, well, wait, how am I looking at my own long game in terms of how I want to feel, perform? And so it's just been really amazing to watch people connect around this idea of looking at this terminology, go the distance, meaning a lot more than just, make it to the finish line of the race, but to be able to build systems that are durable, people that are durable, communities and relationships that are durable, and ask, how's this whole thing going to shake out in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Are we building training systems that allow for that, where we can reach our goals on the trails, but still play that long game, where we're feeling better every year and we're still training with each other?
Mm-hmm. So you're looking at this from a point of view, like, not only are we getting to the finish line in a month from now, the next race, but you're looking 20 years down the road. How can you keep this going for years and years, and to push the boundaries, but not only for now, but for long-term as well?
To push the boundaries, the boundaries of our bodies, and also the boundaries of our minds. I think that there's something that drew all of us to this whole concept of endurance sport training. I grew up the most unathletic dude in the world. And I left school at a really young age. I left school in 8th grade. And I hit the streets in New Jersey pretty hard, and the streets hit me back pretty hard. So when I was 14, I wasn't thinking about 5Ks. I was drinking malt liquor, smoking top tobacco, and pretty much falling apart in every single way, And when we think about what kind of systems last the duration, or the real long haul here, I think it's so important to remember that what got us into this stuff? What got us first excited about this? Who were we before we started running? What really drove us to begin to do this whole endurance sport thing? And how has that journey evolved and changed for us over the long haul? And one thing we work to do with our athletes and for ourselves is to really get deep and honest about those questions. Because I know that my own endurance running journey has changed. My why has changed. My goals have changed. And if we can respect our own growth and evolution in this process, I think that's one of the big keys to saying, okay, like, what got us to our first starting line? You know, what was that journey to want to think about running ultra endurance races? And then what evolved from there? What did we actually learn on the trails?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a lot of time to think when you're out running on the trails. What are the real key lessons that we extracted? And did it provide any level of clarity? All that time to think, I think, for a lot of my friends in the ultra running world, has provided this opportunity to get clearer about where we're going in other realms of our lives.
Totally.
And ask, can we leverage the lessons from sport into the bigger picture of goals, like what we're trying to do outside the, you know, the race course?
Yeah. I love it, man. That's what I'm all about. Like, sure, like, running on trails is fantastic. And I've through ultra endurance sports, I've learned a lot about myself. Right. But, how can I apply that to the rest of my life? Like, can I take that and can I use that? Can I, you know, okay. So if I got myself to the finish line of 100-mile race through mentors, through training, and, you know, driving myself through this purpose, can I take those principles and take them anywhere else in my life? Can I start a business? Can I write a book? Can I learn a foreign language? I've already done like the hardest thing in my life, right? Like running 100 miles or farther. You know, you come to those points in your mind where it's like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know if I can do it. And then eventually you do it. But can you take that and translate it to the rest of your life, man? That's what I am trying to help my athletes with as well. And it sounds like you're on the same track. It sounds like you're really focused on the mental component of all of this. Is that right?
It is. It's mental and then it's physiological.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the word mental, the word mindset, these get thrown around a lot in the endurance sport world, just in general. And I think it's like, it's almost led us to kind of have this archetype around mental toughness or mental resilience. And you see it come up a lot in the sport training world. But I'm really interested in the actual neuroscience of this stuff and what drives reward and motivation, and what happens when we are, what happens when we've reached a certain plateau in what we can learn through sport, and we need to test this stuff out in life. Mm-hmm. You know, what happens when the 100-miler was the hardest thing, but now the hardest thing is, to your point, starting the business. And you have all these lessons of what you were physically capable of doing. You have the lessons of the dedication and commitment that it took to go through the training process. But that ability to make the jump and say, we're probably chasing a couple of states through this process of running. We're probably chasing a state that looks like flow, some state of pure immersion in activity and experience where we're 100% there. And if you look at the science on flow and happiness, you see that being this huge correlative to happiness in our lives. The amount of time that we're able to spend in timeless moments, immersed in conversation or running or writing or whatever it might be. And when we watch athletes who've gotten injured, if that was their access to flow, if that was their way to tap into flow, and that's taken away, that can be hugely damaging. So we try to ask, what are other portals for flow in our lives? When we look at the reward mechanism of running, we look at the actual neuroscience of this, and we think about serotonin levels and dopamine levels, and what happens when we used to get this huge reward because there was fear there. It was an unknown that we were approaching. We didn't know if we can do it. Dopamine is through the roof. You show up to your first 100-mile race, and it's gonna be an epic and wild learning journey. And then you get to your second 100-mile race, you know, your third, your fourth, your fifth. We have to start to ask, well, what if I'm not as motivated? Well, that doesn't mean that I'm a weaker person. It doesn't mean I have less mental toughness. It means that my reward mechanism is shifted. There's a known there now. I know that I can do this now. So what does it mean to me to run long distances? How much of that is now a part of my identity? How much of that is a part of my community? Meaning that's how I connect with my friends. And is there a longevity built into that? Mm-hmm. You know, so these are some of the things I've seen in the coaching world, of watching athletes who were doing a lot of ultramarathoning and aren't anymore. And I always ask, well, what happened? What bridges could have been built to larger communities that people could access flow, could access drive, passion, reward, community, tribe, and connection, so that we don't just beat to death the one pathway that we're using to achieve these states.
Totally. Totally. So say I am a potential client knocking on your gym door saying, I'm interested in what you guys are doing here. You know, I run a little bit. I have some races I'm looking at in the future. How can you guys help me? What does that look like?
Well, the Distance Project is an interesting place, the actual physical location, because it's an invite-only gym at this point.
Okay.
And we know that in order to give the most to the small group of athletes who come here, you know, we're probably going to be trying to figure out if it's a good fit as a team to be part of this thing, because we ask a lot of the athletes who show up, and we ask them to ask a lot of us as coaches. You know, I think that there is, when you first start coaching, there's a model sometimes where you're trying to pacify people because you need the revenue or you need the clients. You're just kind of being generally very, very nice and pacifying people to build a good working relationship. But you get to a certain stage in your career where you have to start to ask, is this really the best fit? This is a demanding environment, because if I'm going to get the most out of you, I'm going to have to push you. And if you're going to get the most out of me, you're going to have to ask good questions and push back on my training methodology. And if I feel like I have someone who I can't push or who won't be able to push back, I think that we're probably going to run into a dead end from a progress perspective. Okay. Some people are just looking for a mileage training plan, and I'll tell them, you can go get that online somewhere. But if you want to go through the process of learning about your physiology through training, learning about your body, learning about your actual physiology, learning about aerobic capacity, making training something that is part of an ongoing learning journey, this is probably going to be a great fit. Because we're going to get to go really deep into who you are. We're going to do some basic assessments. We're going to pull you back from running off a cliff. And what I mean by that is, if there are glaring issues physically that are going to ultimately run you into a wall of injury, we're not going to start to set up some kind of 100-mile training week just because you're really jazzed about, you know, the race that's coming up. We're going to really try to redirect this and say, look, how can we look at the big picture of this thing together? How can we kind of, from the foundation, redefine what endurance means? Meaning, I want to fix the problems that are clearly evident right now. I want to give you a strategy to do this thing that you're telling me that you love and care about for as long as possible. And that's going to take going really deep with each other and learning about you and about our approach to endurance training. So if it looks like it really is going to be a good fit, because the person is a curious learner who's thinking like long game, I would love to dive in through some basic assessments and set up a program. But if it isn't at this point in their journey in endurance, then I'm going to recommend them to a coach who might have a different approach. And I think that that's probably the best thing all of us can do, is say, where is this athlete right now? What do they need? And is it through the style of coaching that we offer? Okay.
So rather than just taking anybody off the street, it sounds like you're looking for like mentees almost, and you're doing a little bit of life coaching. Would that be accurate? Or like, I'm just trying to get a broad picture of what you're doing here.
It's not so much mentees. You know, we really don't, I really don't think of our coaching at the gym in a hierarchical way. It's a team of people who show up and throw down every day. We all learn from each other, you know? So the question that we always ask is for this team of people in the community who are doing all these different, you know, races, and they're aged, we have 10-year-olds, we have 80-year-olds. Is this going to be something that grows the community and makes it stronger? We're selective about who we bring in because there are, again, I think that there are athletes who are driven to contribute to communities. It's contributive. It is a team thing.
Sure.
If that fit is right, the whole thing's going to grow. People will be out in group runs together. They'll be doing the thing. But there are also people who just they're not looking for that much from the fitness training experience. They're literally looking for like a mileage training plan. And they have a set way of thinking about how they're going to approach endurance training. And when we look at what we've seen not work, my biggest fear is pacifying somebody and putting them on a program because they want to run a lot of miles. They want to do 100-mile training weeks. They don't want to do the other work necessary to strengthen joints, strengthen muscles. And I just know at that point that I'm not going to be able to give them what they want. And ultimately, we're not going to be able to make the kind of long-term progress. So it's more about, is this a good fit for the team? Can we do this for the long haul? And are you really interested in learning? Because if so, we're going to dive really deep into some concepts about human movement that I think are going to set you up not only for success this season, but for success season after season.
Yeah. So talk about those concepts. Like, are you introducing people to different breathing techniques, different diets, cold water immersion, yoga, meditation, all these other crazy sort of things that people are doing nowadays? Or
it's funny that you say that, because there's a lot of crazy things that people are doing nowadays. I think that what we're trying to introduce people to is like blunt objectivity. like no BS, blunt objectivity. Like, what do we know about like anatomy and physiology? What is a trend? What seems to be a hot topic? How much, and when I go back to the idea of pushing back on each other, how much can we just honestly, objectively look at a situation and say, look, there's a lot of BS in the fitness industry. I don't think it's malevolent, malicious. I think that we all get this sort of curse of knowledge. We learn a new thing. We think that everyone else has learned that thing. We get very passionate about it, maybe even very, even arrogant about it, right? It's no way to train.
Yeah, this is the diet to have.
It's the diet you have to do. And I think after you drink enough of that Kool-Aid, you just get sick of the taste of Kool-Aid.
Right.
And you're like, look, I'm going to take a look at your feet. We always train barefoot. And if your toes are folding over one another, that's a problem. I'm going to help work on that. A foot has to do a certain kind of thing, which is supination and pronation when you step. If it doesn't do that, you're going to run into an injury at your knee or your hip or your ankle. I know that we can bulletproof that. We can look at that together. And then we can look at all these different approaches to training and say, again, what's really driving this person to do this stuff? Are we putting together some bare minimum kind of training program to get them to survive this race? Or are we trying to correct some movement issues, maybe some breathing issues, maybe some actual joint range of motion issues that are going to set them up long-term for success? And that's where an athlete who wants a quicker fix to a long-term problem is going to ultimately not going to be able to serve them well, because we want to be able to clean up some of the issues that are going to help them look at endurance through a new lens and say, again, I want to do this year after year. So I got to probably work on joint range of motion. I have to work on movement imbalances. I have to work on dysfunction at certain joints. And I probably want to work on actually understanding what aerobic capacity means, what requisite physical attributes we need to run long distances, and then to have even very open conversations to the earlier point of our conversation about what really drives you to be on the trails. Because if what drives you to be out there is hanging out with your friends for 5-6 hours, that's an awesome thing. That's super, super cool. If you think you need to run for 5 and 6 hours on Saturday and on Sunday and then again on Tuesday, that's a different thing. So the more that we can be honest and direct with each other and say, what are you after here, man? What are you looking for? Then we can build a training program that doesn't take away what you need, but doesn't lead you to believe that you need to follow a specific program because you read about it in a book, even if it's hurting you, or even if it's holding back your progress, or even if it's hurting your relationships because you haven't been home in a month.
Totally. Yeah.
We've seen that. I think we've all kind of seen that grind in the endurance world.
We've seen that, and I've even experienced that. I've been there.
So yeah. I remember, man, like when I first started doing this, I was on Ultra Sign Up every night.
Right.
It's an Ultra Runner podcast every night. I was in it, immersed in it. And then you learn some lessons from it, and then your goals change. And so to respect, and that's why I keep going back to respecting where the person is. If they're on Ultra Sign Up every night, if all they're thinking about is this race, my goal is to help them succeed at that, and not to give them BS, to give them a real plan to help them succeed, even if it looks different than what they were initially envisioning, because our approach to endurance is a little bit different than what they may have seen before.
Sure. Yeah. How did you get into this world? I'm guessing that you sort of dove into all these different aspects into yourself first and kind of put the puzzle together in one way, shape or another. And then sort of now you're teaching this to other people, but I'm not sure. Is that how it was for you, or how did this all come together?
It was getting kicked out of school in 8th grade, because I figured, well, damn, I better learn something. Any longer. So like, I'd better start to learn stuff to figure out how to survive, make a living, make a life. And it made sense to me that the first place to begin to learn would be about myself.
Totally.
Psychology, physiology. Like if I could know something about how my mind and body worked, I would just have a better shot at navigating this crazy environment, which was urban New Jersey as a 14 or 15-year-old. I was school in the streets, and I through that journey ended up running into all of the inevitable, I don't know if they're inevitable, but they're kind of obvious roadblocks to making it out of New Jersey. You're hanging out on the streets a lot as a kid. People are drinking, people are smoking. Before you know it, your lifestyle is, it's really, really objectively unhealthy. And it happened to be a friend of mine who had the guts to say to me, like, man, you're really falling apart, dude. You look terrible. At the time, you could still say that to people. It wasn't also, we weren't so interested in pacifying each other. We were kind of interested in pushing each other, and that saved my life. And this guy said to me, I want you to come to this jiu-jitsu gym with me.
How old were you?
What's that?
How old were you at this time?
This is probably like 19 at this point.
Okay.
I've been through the malt liquor. I've been through the cigarettes. I've been through waking up in the middle of the night, hacking out a lung because I'm smoking 3 packs a day. I've been feeling so physiologically run down, and that looked very much like anxiety, depression, exhaustion.
Totally.
It looked like what would happen if you ate a bunch of, a bunch of cheap pizza, washed it down with malt liquor, and smoked 3 packs of top tobacco every day of your life for a couple of years.
Yep.
And at about 19, this guy dragged me into this jiu-jitsu studio, and I was making every excuse not to go. I'm totally BSing him because I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm legitimately scared because it felt like I was going to walk into a door to an alternate world and have to make a deep choice. That, when I look back on it now, I wasn't scared of the physical pain that I knew would come from being like this out of shape, really overweight smoker, getting my ass kicked by a bunch of random people.
Right.
I was scared because I was going to walk into a different life, and I knew there was going to be a crossroads there.
Oh, and you knew that. You felt that.
I knew it. I felt like he was asking me to go there for a reason. And I knew that I couldn't imagine at the time what life would be like to not wake up and smoke a cigarette first thing. Right. I couldn't imagine what life would look like not to go to bed after several drinks. And I knew there was a reason he was asking me to go there. And I walked in with this kind of nervousness that I've never experienced before or since. And as soon as I walked in the room, I saw this alternate culture. And it had so much of what I came to, I guess, find strength in the sort of street culture, because there were ethos of discipline, there were ethos of resilience and grit. But I saw it being modeled by people who were clearly taking care of their bodies and minds, and they were clearly doing so in a community that pushed one another. And it was clearly a no BS environment. It was a tough environment to get into. I think we modeled a lot of our training principles at the Distance Project from this place, because it wasn't where you just show up, swipe a card at the front desk, and jump on a machine. It was like, who are you? What do you want? Yeah. And that night, I did get my ass kicked pretty thoroughly. I had a defining moment in my life where I had a guy on top of me. We were doing this rolling in jiu-jitsu, and I couldn't breathe because I was smoking so heavily. And I just hit the mat and I tapped out, and I said I quit. And the guy looked at me and he was like, "Are you sure?" Because I wasn't in a hold. I wasn't in a submission hold. Like, he was wondering what the hell happened, right? And all I could think of is I just submitted to a guy, and I wasn't even in a hold, and he asked if I was sure. And that's not who I want to be. It's not who I want to be in my life. I had to face myself in that moment. And it was through jiu-jitsu that ultimately I got injured in some really random sparring match. And my coach at the time gave me the book Ultramarathon Man by Dean Karnazes, because he, as a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt and one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu teachers I can, out there, he was still pushing himself to explore fear and limits. And he had just run an ultramarathon. He had just run a 50K. You don't see that a lot in jiu-jitsu.
No, especially not back then. Yeah.
Well, he was a jiu-jitsu black belt who got into Olympic weightlifting. He got into trail running. And when I read this book by Dean Karnazes, I was just so mind blown by the fact that running these distances was possible. I look back now at our goals. I wish that I at least saw the bridge earlier, because I think that there's something incredibly inspiring in at least seeing the limits of human endurance and potential. It puts things in a greater perspective when all that you see are people smoking cigarettes and getting hammered. You don't know that this alternate reality is happening. And when I found out that you could run 50 miles or 100 miles, I was so mind blown that I had to see if I can do it, and I had to train to do it. And I signed up for my first 50-mile race that year. And that started this multi-year journey of saying, okay, well, if you can do 50, well, hell, I bet we can do 100. Just kind of up in the ante, like all of us seem to.
Yeah.
Enjoy doing.
Our journeys are pretty similar, man. So this is cool, man. Like, so same here. I was involved with the martial arts world. I was doing karate and taekwondo back in the day. And then I would notice that after our taekwondo class, these big guys would come in and they were doing the jiu-jitsu, you know, and I was like, whoa, these are the big guys. They look extra tough, you know. I'm like, wonder what they're doing. And then I started frequenting their classes, and I got my ass kicked for a year straight up. Like, I don't think I tapped anybody for a year. It was a bunch of big cops and stuff in there, and I just got my butt kicked over and over and over. But I just kept coming back because I knew there was something there. I knew if I stuck with it, something was going to unlock in my mind, and I was going to kind of figure out who I was and what I was made of. And then my introduction to ultramarathons was the exact same way, man. Dean Karnaz's book, Ultramarathon.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I'm reading the book. Like, I just can't believe that this is humanly possible, you know, and eventually signed up for my first 50 mile. And
what was it? What was your first 50?
My first 50 was the North Face 50 in Wisconsin.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So our journeys are really similar, man. Yeah, so I appreciate your story, and there's a lot there that we could dive into. But who was your jiu-jitsu instructor at the time?
J-Jack.
Okay.
J-Jack, the Academy of Main Martial Arts.
Okay. And so he's the one that turned you on to not only jiu-jitsu, but this other world of ultramarathon running and just sort of unlocking your human potential, it sounds like.
It was that, and it also, again, I can't tell you how much it shaped our methodology and philosophy at the Distance Project for two reasons. One is it was a business. It's a business. It's a very successful business, but it was more than a business. Coaching can't just be a business. Mm-hmm. That's why I told you a bit about our methodology. Coaching can't be a business like going to get a haircut is like going to frequent a business. Right. There's a level of depth that has to be there if you're going to do something really hard, like run an ultra marathon. And if you're going to do it in a way that at the end of the day, we can know that we used at least the experience that we took the experience that we have, and that we really gave you every opportunity to succeed, because it's really easy to remember. I used to run 100-mile weeks. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was training for Eastern State's 100, that's the tool that I had in the toolbox. And I've tried so many different training methodologies. And what Jay showed me was that probably the best thing that you can learn to do as a coach is to kill sacred cows fast. Kill them fast. If something isn't working, kill it, question it, be objective, really be ready to look at it from all angles, have no emotional attachment to a methodology.
Right.
So those two pieces of the puzzle of it would have been just as easy for him to say, hey, dude, why don't you get out of here? You know, he didn't need my money every month. And that made me feel like I had to be, that it was me I had to provide value, not just my debit card. And I think the people who train at the Distance Project recognize that they provide value. It isn't they're swiping the debit card every month, they're writing a check every year. They inherently make the training center what it is. They are of value. And the reason that we have that process of inquiry on the way in isn't to be elitist or non-welcoming. It's to really find the people who care about things like that. You know, coming to a community center where you matter and where the energy that you bring in matters and the way that you contribute to the community matters, because then you can build something that feels like a team where people really are getting close, and they can do this for 5 years, for 10 years. I remember some of the people who are training with us now were there on day one. And I think they're still going to be there when we sign our next 5-year lease in 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that inspires me a lot, is to ask again, what do we mean by endurance? Does it mean a podium finish at this 50-miler this August? Maybe we can get that too. We don't know. You know, we're going to figure out where the person's at. does it mean a long game? And if so, it's such a wonderful journey because we change through the process of our running. Our running probably changes us. I've learned so much in those long nights on the trails where you're really just looking at yourself the same way in that moment of pure reflection. And there's gonna be a different why, I think, every year as the racing season comes up. Why am I doing it? What does it mean to me now?
Yeah.
Where does it fit in life right now?
Yeah, that's true. Your why changes. And that's something important to look at, especially if you are looking for, long-term clients that are going to be around for years and years. So it sounds like you're actively turning away people from your gym as well. If it's not a good fit, and not that you're just kicking them out on the street, but maybe you're referring them to someone else that may be more in alignment with their particular goals. So what sort of things are you looking for in a client? You say there's like almost an inquiry process at the beginning. What sort of questions are you asking people and how are you digging in like that?
It's more of a subtle conversation. I mean, you can tell pretty quick. The place is an interesting place. The actual layout of the place is obviously an unconventional gym. There's a ton of graffiti all over the walls. We have, if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see what like a tight knit. There's like 10-year-olds swinging kettlebells in the corner. There's an ice bath out front. It's like clearly not meant to be a commercial gym. So people kind of walk in and you can tell when they take a look around if they're digging the vibe. Mm-hmm. And when we begin to talk about what they want out of this, more often than not, it ends up being a good fit. They found us for a reason because we don't have the inflatable wavy arm guy outside saying $10 a month. We don't do marketing and advertise that way. It isn't our prime business at this point. We have a consulting company who focuses on respiratory education, and we run a nonprofit organization. So the actual coaching has been, maybe 4 hours a day at this point of what used to be the bulk of what we did. Yeah. And I've seen when we first moved to our bigger space, I saw the result of not having that kind of in-depth inquiry process. We started to get more athletes than we'd ever had a bigger place and people were coming in. And the quality of the relationships is what took a hit. And my ability to watch athletes, we have group classes and group training, my ability to be as present to each of their movement strategies took a hit. And I saw the really magical, community that we created in this parking lot. I said, if that ever gets sacrificed by having more members here, we're just going to have to really be discerning in terms of how big, whether bigger is better, because it often isn't. I really believe that a lot of the future of fitness is in group training because I think that our need to connect with one another is more important. I think that that's what people are coming for every night. It's having a raw human experience with other people. And I think that when you only have the outlet of running, or you only have the outlet of strength and conditioning, or you only have the outlet of blank, if that outlet gets closed temporarily, or if you need to just do something different, in terms of how you're going to develop a training year, you're going to be looking at cycles, and the more opportunities that you have to find flow, connection, fitness, training that are not just in one pattern, one plane, and going down one road, the more that you're going to be able to build a long-term training system. So I want to make sure that the person also is interested in these elements of strength and conditioning, that that's a good fit for them. I don't believe in writing mileage plans for people. I need to be able to see how you move, because I can't send you out for 40 miles a week with these glaring issues that I know are going to run you into a wall. Right. So for the most part, people who've seen what we do, they kind of want to go a little bit deeper to the training experience. They want to learn more about the physiology. They want to probably learn more about the mechanics. They like the idea of adding strength and conditioning that complements their running goals and just doesn't just hit them with a baseball bat in the head. Yep. They see us right often. I think that that's one of the things that brings people in, is they see us. Our philosophy is pretty evident on our social media pages. And I think that they think that they're going to get a community-based training experience that prioritizes them as a person and cares about them for the long haul. So more often than not, it is a good fit. Every now and then, when it isn't, we're just sure to make sure that we're playing the long game and building a community that feels like, everyone feels respected, heard, seen, and wants to be there every night with each other.
Yeah. So it sounds like community is the biggest thing for you guys, building that community and just, focusing on each other and each other's personal needs and bringing each other together as a group.
100%. I mean, I like to ask the question, what is fitness? It's probably a worthwhile question in the fitness industry, and I think that fitness is the ability to survive and thrive in the environment that we're in. And if you look at the environment that we're in right now in 2021, after a year of isolation, a pandemic, gyms that have closed, relationships that have just been disconnected, I think that the idea that we're more likely to need quality social relationships more than we're likely to need a certain number of weight on the deadlift bar or a certain number of reps or a certain number of miles is probably an evolutionary reality right now. It seems like having people around you to keep you connected to perspectives out of your own, quality people who will challenge your thinking, good conversations, ongoing relationships is probably more important than the sole physiological adaptation, which is fitness training. So our goal is constantly to ask, how do you do smart group training that does respect each person's body? There's only so big a class that you can really do that in.
Totally. Yeah. And it's going to look different for everybody. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Yeah. It's going to be different for everybody. Yeah, man, that's so important, is having people that you can talk to and ask those bigger questions to, which is something that I've just come across in the last couple of years of my life. I was someone who always wanted to do things by myself, and I accomplished a fair amount of crap by myself. And, but having those people that I can ask the bigger questions to, and more specifically for me, myself, having men that I can sit down with that have, similarities, and I can ask them, how do you do this? How's your relationship work? And, do you do any reading or studying outside of, just questions like that? For me, that's opened my world up in a big way. So it sounds like you guys are right on track with all that.
It's everything to us. And I would love for your listeners to know that, again, the reason that we're so discerning about the gym, it's not that it's this private elite club. It's that we care about the social relationships. We care about the fact that, I'll give an example. Our gym has 24/7 access for our members. And it's a small community of 25, 30 athletes. And I tell our members, if you come in here at 10 o'clock at night after your shift to use the gym, you're going to find a high quality, high caliber human being who has your back and is a teammate, and you never have to worry about that. And that's the reason that we run the gym the way we are. Because to make that promise to our athletes, when they know that they can come in at any time of day or night, and that the person in there is somebody who is not only safe at the lowest, rung of assessments, but somebody who's going to help them out, spot them, who's going to respect them, care about them. I think that those training relationships, I think that what's going to keep us in the game of mental and physical fitness the longest is the degree to which we're actually building friendships and relationships in that space. Because if our way to see each other, to hang out with each other, to have those good conversations is a trail run or a workout or a breathing session, that looks like a great long game plan for a life of health and fitness. If I have one buddy that I run with and he stops running or she stops running, or one of us gets hurt and I don't have that other outlet in my life, that's going to be problematic. So I think the more that we can build those healthy relationships and say, well, maybe we're going to do a breathing class, maybe we're going to do a mobility-based class, maybe a strength and conditioning workout, maybe a trail run, maybe we'll go to the track. Maybe we'll look at the mental components of fitness and be able to say, I want to have a really good conversation. I want to jump on Zoom with a friend. And I want to remember that to have this thing I think we call mental health right now in 2021 is probably to understand that our worlds have gotten infinitely smaller based on these social media algorithms that show us a tiny microcosm of reality and they magnify it 100x. So to have people of different political persuasions, different philosophies, life ideologies, to have them in a room having quality, respectful conversations that challenge each other's thinking, to me is like how you stay mentally fit. And that's probably one of the most important things we can cultivate is this concept of mental fitness if we're going to think about doing this for a long time.
Yeah, totally. Talking to you is interesting, man. It makes me more curious about you, your in your own personal journey. So going back to when you were 19 and you went into this jiu-jitsu gym for the first time, did this transformation happen like almost overnight for you, or was it a slow process?
It was. So when you think about Yeah, it was overnight. It was like I learned that about myself. It's probably why I ended up, drinking so hard. Right? When you look at the correlatives between like endurance training and addiction, they're huge. They're neurological correlatives.
Yeah.
Right? You're probably going to like start a company or rob a 7-Eleven if you're in neurological makeup.
Yeah.
And the more that you know that about you, the more that we can collectively learn about our brains and bodies with objectivity. And say, what if I was just looking at this biological organism? It wasn't me, and I didn't have this whole set of biases around how self-important I should be. Mm-hmm. I was just like, I wonder what the hell this thing is and how it works. We'd start to recognize the neurological drivers for reward and for behavior. Mm-hmm. And we'd realize why some people become, serial entrepreneurs or ultramarathoners, or convicted, again, like you want to close out the bar. You're the ones who take everything you do to an extreme. So I think I realized in that moment in the Jiu-jitsu center, I don't know that it was conscious at 19, but it was, I feel like there was this subconscious thread of I should get hooked on this. Like I could see this being the thing that I wake up and it's on my mind. I can see this being the thing that I think about throughout the day and can't wait to get there. Mm. And I can see this being the thing where I push myself harder than I've ever gone because I'm really excited about it. And it seems like it can change my life. So I think there was this subconscious reality of like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to go all in. I remember going home that night and wondering where in the hell I was going to get the money to join this gym. Mm-hmm. I was making minimum wage at the time, and I ended up living on black beans. I'm not, just saying that. There were Goya black beans and hot sauce quite a while. And that's how I joined the gym, and I was fine. Like that's how it went down. And it really did. It changed my life, and I think I left that experience with the idea that fitness could change lives. That's what I learned through personal N=1 experience, that fitness was more than losing some weight, getting buff. I learned in that moment through living it, that fitness in the right environment at the right time could change somebody's life.
Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned that you were drinking and smoking before this. Did you immediately put that stuff down and start training right away? Like I'm a guy I'm in recovery personally.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, and you're right. Addiction and ultramarathon running, there's a big correlation there. And there's a lot of people in the recovery world that are running ultramarathons. So I'm interested in all this stuff, man.
No, yeah, you know what? That was a harder one because I did try to quit immediately, but it took me a few tries. And I remember trying to run around this 3.5 mile loop by my house, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it around the loop because I was smoking 3 packs a day. And I thought I need to up my conditioning game. I can't breathe in this jiu-jitsu environment. It's claustrophobic. I'm not going to be able to get the most out of it or give the most to it. I didn't want to be the person who couldn't bring my A game to it. Mm-hmm. And the more that I, kind of put the 2 and 2 together, I didn't remember what it felt like to not be a smoker. I didn't remember what that felt like. So getting to the first mile of this 3.5 mile loop and having to walk and having to stop and wheezing and coughing and not really having an archetype for how my body felt before that. And then finally getting through the process of getting through the nicotine withdrawals and being like, oh my God, I can breathe again. And then getting to say, wait a minute, I don't feel these subtle, I don't have these subtle run-ins with anxiety that I used to have pervasively when I was drinking and smoking. And then you look at the depressive elements of alcohol. And it wasn't until later in my life where I really got into the neuroscience world. We partner with a couple of amazing neuroscientists right now in our company, Breathe to Perform, where we study the relationship between breathing and the brain. But without that, any of that knowledge, I was watching how I felt in the world change dramatically as I started adopting these new behaviors. And I went from feeling terrible to feeling really amazing. And I thought, I want to help people. My mission is to try to show that bridge is there and to be as objective as possible, to not let somebody, to not run away with the latest thing that got me excited, because that can put off people. Mm-hmm. Just to say there's a lot of ways to get healthy and fit. There's a lot of diets, a lot of training sets, there's a lot of paths. But if you're aiming over that bridge to where you feel mentally and physically awesome, and you can start to ask the bigger picture questions in your life, like, what is my mission? Where am I going? you've leveraged this training opportunity and done something tremendous with it. And then you can share that. And that's probably part of the intergenerational circle of learning a skill, sharing a skill, and growing from the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hear, when you're talking, I hear the service mindset. It's like you're all about helping other people. So what for you, was it you helped yourself first and kind of put this puzzle together and figured yourself out, and then it was time to sort of spread this knowledge? Is that how it was?
Yeah, I think it has to be. You have to get out of the survival state, and I was certainly in one. I was in a pure base level survival state. And
now, were you like living on the streets, or how rough was it for you?
Yeah, I ended up living in a tent for quite a while. And I opened up my business actually the year after. I was living in this tent, and I was training for the Grindstone 100 at the time. So I was doing a lot of running, a lot of training. And yeah, it was, again, I had this context for fitness as being something that had community relevance. I know that if it wasn't for somebody kicking my ass and getting involved in my life and becoming a mentor, I don't know where I'd be today. So it felt to me like it wasn't, I don't even think of it in terms of service. It just felt like connecting the circle. Like you'd be like, okay, well, let me show this to somebody now. And then you realize that the most beautiful thing that can happen, I think, is that you end up in this non-hierarchical environment. So when you think about mentors and mentees, I often ask my athletes, who are your mentors? I want to know, because I think that the art of seeking out mentors is there's a resource there that's invaluable. There are people with lived life experience who will take you through they'll help you avoid obvious mistakes. They'll help clarify your thinking. They'll push back on you in this really amazing way. But I think that a really beautiful thing happens when you're in a non-hierarchical environment where everyone has a strength and a gift and a knowledge set, and they're willingly sharing it. That, to me, that's where I thrive. That's where I find flow. So if I'm coaching a class, I'm in flow. I look forward to that all day long. I coach, 2 to 3 classes every night, and it's this again, raw human experience that's happening. And when I'm on a run, I'm there. So to me, it doesn't seem like a service at all. It seems like this really wonderful exchange where hopefully everybody's having this experience that feels really human, and where you leave feeling stronger from it.
Yeah. So what sort of classes are you personally teaching every night? Are they weightlifting, running, or you mentioned breathing, you mentioned cold water immersion. What sort of classes are you teaching?
I guess it's all of those. I guess that probably would be the class description, is everything you just said. Because in every class we start off by letting we train barefoot in the gym. We've always trained barefoot in the gym. We're looking to look at the learning opportunities. And I guess I know that we keep kind of circling back, but again, to think about the person for whom it's a right fit for, it's just that training is a learning opportunity. I think that training and fitness at certain parts of your life are about learning and self-exploration. And in other parts of your life, depending on who you are, there may be about escape. I know that was true in my own life. Yes. There's times that I was running from something and times that I've been running for something.
Totally, 100%.
And it would have been helpful to me to have had some direction in meeting somebody when I was running from something, who would have said to me, like, what are you running from? Like with honesty and directness, because they saw these habitual compulsive patterns. But because we don't tend to do that for each other that much, we're so, again, I think that we, out of respect, we pacify instead of push. And I'm sure there's a place for that. I look at mistakes I've made as a coach and as an athlete, and I've just always wanted somebody to step up immediately and say, dude, what are you doing? Justify that, talk it out, talk me through your thinking, instead of letting somebody make that mistake again and again. It's helpful. I like those conversations. I think that they're important. So when we have people in the gym, if training is learning, then I like to learn from what they're doing. We have all the athletes lead a movement-based warm-up, and I tell them to do the thing that they feel that their body needs. And it's very interesting to me to see the patterns that they pick. Maybe they're bear crawling, maybe they're jumping, maybe they're rolling, maybe they're inchworming, maybe they're shuttle running, but they're expressing themselves physiologically, and that's information for me. If we're on a heavy strength cycle, and the movements that the athletes pick, that's information for me as a coach. If they're not particularly springy, if everybody looks tight, if everyone looks overly grounded, if it looks like that springy athleticism is something I've compromised by making the wrong set of decisions, I'm going to get to see that in their warm-up. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be interesting to watch that. I can also then watch how they're going to approach running. You know, I'd love to maybe dive into that a little bit with you as the conversation evolves, but I don't want to make running feel unnatural for people. I don't want to take out this thing that feels like free movement, but I do want to just give them a few principles that they learn to feel, because that will then carry over into their running. So when I watch somebody barefoot moving, I want to see if their foot can supinate and pronate. I want to see what their hips are doing. I want to see what their movement strategy is. And if I have an athlete, for example, who's doing some kind of a shuffle walk and what we call pigs on ice skates, where you're kind of in a half crouch with your hands behind your head doing this, this fancy maneuver. And I noticed, that her arch can supinate and pronate on one foot, but not the other. Well, then I'm going to take a look at that when she does her shuttle run and her walking lunge and all this other stuff. I'm going to say, well, that's a problem that I want to identify, because it's going to be present in her marathon training or ultramarathon training. If her left foot always spins out, well, that's an issue. This is glaring information. You can start to watch athletes move and learn about where their bodies are right now. Is somebody, I love to watch athletes breathe, because it shows me where they're compressed and where they're overly expanded. And these are things that we can do to fix running mechanics, is by giving people a strategy to compress where they're way opened up and to expand where they're compressed. And I get to see that in the warm-up. So the warm-up is sort of casual in that they're running around the gym. I'm watching for things that are important information for me to help guide their progress. And then we'll move into some type of plyometric, some type of neurological training. We're going to talk about getting ourselves psyched on purpose, making sure that I'm not the maestro of that, because that's not then a skill, it's a play. Mm-hmm. It's like, I tell athletes, like, if you can get to that state of neural drive, if you can rev up your nervous system, if you can be ready to go when somebody else isn't ready to go, well, that's a competitive skill. And it's nice to have that tool. If you need me to put on a certain song, me to tell you to jump up and down, I'm a puppet master. I'm not giving you a skill that you can run with. So we'll do some type of plyometric training to get them ready to rock and roll. We'll usually hit our strength work and accessory work, aerobic capacity, and then we'll, depending on what we're doing in the training cycle, we have these 1-hour classes that look like a pretty similar breakdown of free-form movement, plyometric, strength, accessory, whatever we're going to call conditioning, whatever energy systems we're working with, direct core training and breathing at the end, recovery, and then some hangout time to just kick it and see how everybody's actually doing in life.
Okay.
And a lot more ice baths before COVID.
Really?
We're still at the gym right now. It's been just such a wild year. I mean, we had to close the space for 3.5 months. That was heartbreaking, because we're all pretty tight and we're doing the thing on Zoom. So some of the things we did more, we're doing a little less.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, how COVID affected you guys. So you guys were doing like Zoom workouts and stuff to kind of get yourself through it, but now you're kind of back in the gym a little bit more.
We're back in full swing right now, and I think the community has never been. It was a tight community, and it's never been tighter.
Really?
It's just never been tighter. I mean, we all missed each other after that 3-month. Mm-hmm. It's like these are your training partners and your friends, and Zoom isn't the same. Yeah. So the energy has just been amazing. And some people are training for similar races. We run our programming in 4-week blocks, so everybody's doing the same program.
Okay.
It's been wonderful there lately.
Do you have like equal amounts men and women in your gym? Do you have?
No, what's really interesting about the gym is it's probably 70% female, maybe even 80% female.
Okay.
And that happened to be just an interesting evolution. I don't think anybody really knows why. I think that people understand that we're not a macho guy gym. You know what I mean? Like, I think I've been in gyms where the demographic was the opposite. Mm-hmm. And there was just so much obvious bullshit. Like we kind of have take life seriously, but don't take yourself too damn seriously. You know what I mean? Like we're having carrot cake, we're drawing gorillas on the wall. There's kids playing. It really, I think that that's one reason that it works out for more people than not.
Okay.
Is if you come into a gym and there's a cartoon gorilla on the wall and 2 kids running around with an ab wheel and a Wu-Tang Clan is on, and you think that's great, it's probably a good gym for you. If you're too tough or too cool for school, you'll know and I'll know, and you'll probably go to some other gym. So it's its own funnel.
Yeah, for sure. How many coaches do you guys have there, or are you doing all the coaching?
Just two, and at this point, my partner Lex is in physical therapy school. Okay. So she's coaching one-on-one private training.
Okay.
I'm doing the group classes at this point.
Okay. And are group classes just in the evening?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We have again, well, one of our athletes has actually helped to guest coach one of the classes. And I love that when you think about Skillshare. I really love when an athlete starts to pick up on some principles and notice them in other people and be like, oh, wait, I can see why she's doing that. And I can see what strategy I can give her to get in a better position for her squats, or what cue I can give her from a running mechanic perspective. I really like when the principle becomes obvious, because they're just first principles. They're just principles about movement. And then somebody else can pick up on them, because now they're going to understand it about themselves even more. They had to coach it. They got to see it. Yeah. Now, when they're on that trail run and things start to fall apart and they're exhausted, they're going to kind of have it in their bones. Yeah, that's a movement principle. That's kind of just how a foot works. It's kind of how a hip works. And so I really like when the athlete can pick that up and get involved in the coaching a little bit.
How do you pull someone aside and say, listen, you're doing great, but when you're running, you're pronating or you're supinating too much, or you got a little hip movement going on here, or your stride is too big? Is it just as simple as that? Pull them aside and give them a little talk, or how do you approach that?
You know what? We're also open about these things, because there's no value judgment that we place in the stuff, you know, in terms of like these just movement strategies. So I'll usually pull somebody out in class. I'll usually stop and say like, hey, wait, check this out. Could you do a squat for me? Do you see how her left foot just kind of pops up, or she can't keep all the metatarsals down? Her left pinky toe just pops up. What do you guys think that's about? And we'll have a conversation about it. That involves the athlete, you know, so there's never like you're doing this wrong phenomenon. Yep. It's, oh, why do you think that's happening? Let's watch somebody walk, and it turns out that their right arm can swing super nice and free, but their left arm is plastered to their side and it can't move at all. But when I see them run down the road, that's going to be the case. And you're going to see a thorax that can't rotate. And we're going to see all of the, you know, the issues that come from something we didn't address in the training environment. So we're usually just kind of looking at it together. I love to use video to show the athlete what I'm talking about. And to always come back to this idea that we've developed these strategies as a bipedal animal. Bipedalism is hard. Standing on two legs is hard. Gravity's tough. So I think that people have been really open to the idea that, and they're always so inquisitive about that. Tell me what you see. Tell me what I can do more effectively. So it's always this really kind of cool, like it's almost like, hey, this is the greatest place to find this out. That one of your arms is literally stuck to your ribs. Right? Or, you know, because you don't want to find that out at mile 30 of your 50 miler. You want to find it with a bunch of friends in a strength and conditioning environment that's about finding, you know, I don't even call them weak links, but finding little fires to put out now while they're small fires. Yeah.
I'm curious, man, who are some of your mentors? Who are some of the people that you look up to personally and that helped you sort of shape your journey throughout the years?
Some of them are local. The gym itself has some really amazing people there who I learned from. I have a mentor by the name of Ed Geary, who's actually on our board at Physiology First, which is a nonprofit organization that we started out of the Distance Project. Sort of the evolution of an element of what we were doing. And, you know, he's 82 years old and floors me by how brilliant and how objective. Objectivity is the thing that I think is the rarest right now. So the mentors I have in my life are the people who aren't drinking a lot of their own Kool-Aid and can kind of say, like, look, this is how things appear. Can we talk bluntly and honestly about the world around us and not skew the information based on cognitive biases and sunk cost fallacies and our own BS and our own sort of desire to delude ourselves sometimes for the sake of an identity, or, you know, or to maintain a belief that's hard to kill. So he's a huge mentor. I have a mentor in New York by the name of Adam Robinson. And Adam wrote the Princeton Review. incredible mind. My partner Lex and I were down in New York years ago at the Tim Ferriss Show. It's an episode of Tim Ferriss Show, and Adam was on. He was talking about magic and miracles. And it was such an important conversation because you have someone who's done incredibly well in his life, incredibly professional, brilliant, sharp, and incredibly successul. He advises the heads of major hedge funds. So you have somebody who can see the world very clearly in a no BS financial gladiatorial arena, up there talking about the fact that we probably have lost, many of us, the ability to clearly identify our mission or to want to identify our mission. And we've lost the ability to believe in magic and miracles. Maybe we've become cynical, we've become jaded in some way. And so he's a mentor to both Lex and myself on a deep level, and someone that I go to with some of the big picture questions. Yeah. And God, I can think of a lot of people I've never met, because I left school so young. I learned from the authors on my shelf, the podcasts that I listen to, people who've done well in business, people who've done well in working to create change in the world. I seek these people out. I really try to listen to what they're saying. So there are so many thinkers that have impacted me that I've never met, that I consider mentors deeply.
Totally. I'm curious, how do you feel about, I heard someone say this once, you are your own guru. What does that mean to you? I'm curious.
That's scary to me. That's scary to me, because I'll tell you who's a mentor. Yuval Harari, who wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I feel like the path, if there's a path back to a truth right now, because I think we live in a world where objective biological, physiological truths, they're just obscured by a lot of data. When I look at what has happened in the past year, for example, and you look at very polarized arguments online, and you look at this inability to circle back to a shared common reality and a place where we connect as humans, I think it's evident to me what factors contributed to that. When you look at people in their weakest state psychologically, I'm sure we all were when a pandemic hit the country, took us out of our businesses, completely disrupted our lives, we tend to look for communities that push us the least and accept us the most. That seems to be the pathway. And there's a few outliers who really look to just go 10 times harder. Right. They're just, they're the outliers. But I think that people tend to want to be accepted and have their identity reaffirmed. And if we understand how computer algorithms work, these are just algorithms. They're going to show us that version of the world, the same subgroups, the same politics, the same perspectives. And in order to be a part of a group that we now feel like we belong to, we can fall down portals, ideological, political, polarized portals that separate us so far from one another that there's no shared reality. We have nothing but enemies and a version of the world that's a little bit skewed. So I always felt like, I've loved Yuval Harari's perspective on this, which is if we can understand the influence that persuasive technologies have on us, we probably need to learn about the neural architecture of our brain, our actual physiology, and our own psychology. Why are we so easily misled? Why do we prioritize fitting in to the point that we do? Why are we the easiest person to BS? So the reason that scares me is I would hate to be my own guru, because I feel like the propensity to bullshit yourself is so high already that you could go in any direction and believe that you were headed the right way.
True.
I love to almost look at the human mind as a word processor, right? You've had a whole script written on your word processor. It's every experience, the culture you grew up in, your family, your childhood, your background. It's all there like a story. And I have too. Mm-hmm. And put two word processors together with different data, and hopefully they don't somehow go to war, because it's only a different lived experience and different data. And I think that maybe that's the path, or at least in my life, that's been the path back to empathy. I grew up in a neighborhood that was combative. I've had a combative personality in my life, probably related to that, and maybe for other reasons. And to try to find empathy and connection is to try to remember that we're literally just working data sets. We've all had this different set of inputs, and it shaped our entire perspective. So I'm always looking for the places that dissolve those bridges and ask, what are we fundamentally? How are we fundamentally the same, you and I? How are we fundamentally the same as a species right now? And what is really important to moving things forward on a global level right now to get people to put them in a position where they can make the best set of decisions to benefit the future. It seems like there's a couple of big picture problems that we probably want to tackle, like as a people, because not every civilization makes it. You know, and I think that it's important to grapple with the reality that if you get some of these big picture things wrong, you may not get through the other side. So I'm always asking, where can we find cooperation and communication to actually look at the big problems and say, we probably need to group up, tackle these things, and make the best set of decisions in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And the gym is like the perfect place to start with that. You know, it's like you get all sorts of different people coming into the gym, like a jiu-jitsu gym or an ultramarathon. You're going to get different personalities, and, you know, those places will sort of break people down to their core elements where you have to rely on one another, you know, even if you have different opinions.
Yeah, you know what? Just making noise, guttural human noise with other people, pushing the edges of your own physiological capacity, working as hard as you can in that sort of primal state. And we don't ever use the word suffering at the gym. I tell my athletes, you've already beaten yourself if you get into that train of thought. The pain cave, the suffer fest. I'm like, this is all just intensity, physiological intensity, and I love it.
Okay.
When it gets hard in a race or it gets hard in a workout, I love that. I'm into that, you know. So that the idea that we're not coming together to suffer and on our knees, we're here to push the limits so we can expand them together. And there's nothing more beautiful than doing that with other humans, because you can't replicate that online. Mm-hmm. It's its own energy that's really, really hard to replicate. And to your point, we were just talking about this at the gym. One of our goals with Physiology First, our nonprofit organization, is to be able to set up these community campuses and hubs where people can do things like that, because we had gyms all over the country that are no longer here after COVID. I don't know what I would have done as a young dude if there wasn't that Academy of Mixed Martial Arts, if there wasn't some random gym that I used to also frequent, if they just weren't there, if there was no inlet for physical fitness, or if there was only one and it didn't work for me from price point or location. We had a health crisis in this country before COVID, a mental and physical. And now we've shut down a huge number of the inlets for physical and mental fitness. They're just not in communities anymore. So I feel like that may be one of those problems that we objectively have to tackle and say, if we don't want to see mental and physical health decline on a steady multi-year trajectory here, what are going to be the places that people can walk into and say, hey, look, I'm ready to change my life. I want to work out, I want to train hard. There at least has to be something that isn't an app at this point.
Totally. Yeah. So what do we do, man? Like, what can I as a human being do to contribute to the greater good, help people with their mental health? What does that look like to you?
It's a great question, because I think it was Stephen Kotler. He's somebody that I respect, and he wrote a couple of great books. He wrote The Rise of Superman, which goes into the science of flow and peak performance. He wrote Stealing Fire, which I'd recommend to anybody interested in the edges of human potential. It's a phenomenal book, and a couple others. Pardon me for 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So I lost my train of thought there for a second. So sorry. We're talking about Stephen Kotler. You asked what it means for me. And the reason that I brought Stephen up is he had this good set of principles. He's like, pick like 2 or 3 things to talk about, like causes or issues that you're actually going to work on. And life's going to be a whole lot easier, because it'll still be incredibly hard because it's hard to make impact, but you won't walk around with your finger pointing in every direction. You'll say, I have like 2 things I say stuff about, and I actively work on them every day. And his things, I mean, he works on environmental issues and he works on animal rights issues. He has this farm for chihuahuas. It's really cool. It's out in New Mexico. 2 things, so you're not going off the rails with your opinions in all these different directions every time that someone kind of whacks the emotional hornet's nest inside of us. And so the things that I talk about are health. I talk about mental and physical health. And I look at the youth mental health crisis that we're seeing happen to explode. And that to me just seems like an intergenerational problem. It seems like the largest group of Americans, of people, are age 24 to 29. And when you look at the number, right now we have 1 in 4 kids in Maine are being put on anti-anxiety medication. That's 1 in 4 who are being diagnosed with a mental disorder.
Right.
And I think that we fundamentally need to question what that diagnosis even means. What does it mean? What does mental health mean is probably a really important conversation. What is a disorder, or what is an appropriate physiological response? What should a person feel like if they're not exercising, not moving, not sleeping, over-caffeinated, isolated? What should the human body do? And to me, that seems like the most important issue to tackle, simply because all of the other issues are going to require a kind of mental clarity from all of us. We're going to have to be in as sharp a mental state to look at some of the biggest issues of our time and make the best set of decisions. So the thing that we proposed, we built an organization called Physiology First. And the goal was to take a new approach to learning. You know, and the idea was, what if we just tried to learn about ourselves before we learned about things? What if I learned about my physiology and psychology before I tried to learn a bunch of abstract facts? Maybe I'd be more aware of my own biases, ability to be manipulated, ability to be misled. I'd learn more about how to navigate social media and the digisphere with a little bit of agency. Like, I grew up in Jersey. You had to know what neighborhood you were in. You had to be street smart to survive that. How do we become a little more street smart online so you don't end up joining a cult or something? I mean, it's a really polarized, crazy time. And the goal with Physiology First, initially we were presenting brain and body-based learning. And this is things about understanding neurology, physiology, the science of exercise, sleep, breathing, nutrition, along with a set of 21st century life skills, understanding technology, understanding the economy, things you probably want to know if you were to survive and thrive in the environment that we're in.
Sure.
This is before COVID. We were going into local schools, and we had ambassadors globally going into their schools. So they volunteer with us around the world, and they were going and giving presentations. After COVID, we thought, well, we can still do some of this on Zoom, but probably the most important thing we can do is take this concept of an online university that we built. It's called Physiology First University. It's free for students. It's $20 a month for adults. And we have a financial scholarship program if people can't pay that. And to be able to put these resources somewhere where you can access them online, to learn from a bunch of objective thinkers and a bunch of peer-reviewed research what we know about our bodies and brains and minds in 2021, along with resources on navigating technology, navigating some of the external circumstances. And we asked, what if we could get people setting up pop-up campuses? Because now they can set up a pop-up in the garage and say, we're doing this breathing class as part of Physiology First. And you're bringing a couple of kids who are on the local track team, or you're bringing your friends together, or you're working one-on-one with a friend. And you've created a community hub where there wasn't one anymore. The gym isn't there anymore, but maybe you've become a resource. And people can gather and connect and share these resources together. So that's happening globally right now. We actually have pop-ups in South Dakota this week, in Colorado, and in New Jersey. And we're building the first physical location for the university with a student lounge and hangout center adjacent to the Distance Project next month.
Wow.
So big renovation for us. We're taking the building next to us, and it's going to be the actual location for Physiology First University.
Wow. That's incredible. That's good stuff, man.
We have all the kids in there, like helping to decorate and brainstorm.
Yeah.
And we, we're opening, we have a little coffee cafe in it. But as I interview the kids and I'm like, hey, what do you want to see here? The number one thing that continues to come up is, I'm just excited to meet new people, build new relationships. I think we underestimate how much COVID, I've never lived at a time like that in my life where I couldn't willingly see the people in my life. And I think we've all I think it made an impression on us that community is really important. So something people can do is they can ultimately jump on the university page, see what it's all about. And if they wanted to be someone who helped to teach some of these principles, there's full courses. You can say, I want to teach a 15-minute breathing class to mitigate stress and anxiety to my running group. And You have the resources you need. You can pop it up, hashtag it, and now a thing is happening that wasn't happening before. That hopefully brings people together to learn differently.
Wow, that's cool. And this is all on the website, Physiology First.
Yeah, physiologyfirst.org. The website right now, which I'm kind of happy to say, is such a skeleton of its own potential.
Okay.
It's a frame because we want to build this huge resource with all of these online courses. We have people contributing courses. Physiology First University has an athletics department. So we have workouts and programs by some amazing coaches around the world people can access. It has an online social lounge where we jump on Zoom and brainstorm one-to-one, face-to-face, or small group face-to-face. And there's none of the elements built in that are traditional social media. It's all one-on-one, eye-to-eye sort of Zoom, or it's on Slack.
Okay.
It's trying to make kids more aware, and I say kids, anybody a little bit more aware of how Facebook really works and how Instagram works and how spilling your data all over the internet can ultimately come back at you in a way that the world looks smaller than it is and a little bit jaded or more polarized than it did, before you told the world what you thought about everything.
That's true.
Before you got into a 4-day argument with a robot about who you thought should be the president, you might want to recognize that this is a marketplace, and the market is data. It's a data mining marketplace.
Yeah.
And the more that we, forget that, the more that we forget the fact that I think 70% right now of YouTube videos, for example, 70% of YouTube videos are clicked on as a result of the recommendation feature. Now, that doesn't seem like a really harmful thing unless you start to get into some deep conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories, you start to get into any types of, polarized political groups. And to imagine growing up where if you picked a book up off the shelf, 70% of the next books that you would read would be based off that one. Well, that can go south really fast.
Totally.
So we try to show kids again that there's an economy right now, and the economy is data. If something's free, you're probably the product. And you probably want to know that for your own mental health and fitness. And then you can check your reality against others in places like a gym or a trail run, where you go spouting off on something that you're sure is true, and somebody says, well, I disagree. And you actually have to clarify your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Yeah. People aren't ready to do that nowadays.
I worry about that, that I look at, but yeah, tell me if you see the same thing right now. I'm not sure how the mask situation is in your neck of the woods. Yeah. But one thing that's really been interesting, I was super concerned from a neurological perspective, just about the fact that we weren't talking about the psychological impact of some of our strategies. It's not that I had I just thought a conversation should be happening that also took the psychological toll of COVID into account. Yeah. But one thing I've seen happen more this year than ever is we've actually begun to look each other in the eyes again, because we had to. We wouldn't look each other in the, at our gym, we make a practice of looking at each other like you're talking to another human being. But when you go to get a cup of coffee and everyone's eyes dart out of the way, I feel like now we've gotten into the practice, because that's how humans assess one another. We look at facial recognition.
Yeah.
I don't know where that'll leave us, but it seems like when I go to get a cup of coffee or I go to a grocery store, there's this eye contact now that's back, because 3/4 of our face is cut off. I hope that generates into something positive. The reason I brought it up is because before COVID, we were about as socially isolated as you could be. And then we had a pandemic and a campaign of social distancing. So I do really worry of what happens if we lose the ability to look at each other eye to eye, face to face, and have hard conversations.
Yeah.
Critical thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true, man. You're able to read so much out of someone by looking them in the eye. You're able to see their emotion. You're able to see where they're coming from. And I think that's something that was lost there for a while. And I feel like that's sort of coming back around. Yeah.
I was listening to Tristan Harris of The Social Dilemma talk about this, and he had a great point. He's like, there are human heuristics. There are ways that we make sense of each other. There are ways that we tell if we can trust each other. There are even ways of whether we assess if someone is credible when we're looking at them. These are just human assessments. When you see somebody via the lens of a 240 character tweet, if that tweet pissed you off or made you feel some strong emotion, This is a tweet. This isn't a walking, breathing, living human at this point.
Yeah.
How do we get back to being able to see one another? And even, it's actually amazing to me that Zoom is the best thing that we had during the whole pandemic. You know what I mean? Like, you would think that we'd be a little more technologically ready to update that experience. But to do it in person, that stuff seems to happen during long runs.
Yeah.
During workouts, during the hangout sessions after the gym, when everybody's just sitting on a tire, looking at the sunset and feeling completely spent and connected to each other after working.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your relationship with social media like?
It's very, very business oriented.
Yeah.
It's incredibly business oriented.
Okay.
I have 3 different accounts. The Distance Project is our gym, Breathe to Perform is our consulting company, and Physiology First is our nonprofit. And I'm careful to not get confused as to what the tool is. Mm-hmm. We always tell students, a hammer is a tool. I can bang on a nail, I can bang on my thumb, I can break a window. You do a lot with a hammer. It's a tool. To understand that the revenue model in social media is your data, mm-hmm. and it will probably be sold back to you in ways that you can't quite see. Yeah. You'll just start to see your own perspective amplified. Mm-hmm. I'll give a funny example of that. In our company, Breathe to Perform, I'm more likely on my Instagram to see posts about nose hair in a disproportionate percentage of my feed. Now, I don't think that the world is having a nose hair renaissance. I don't believe that when I go downtown Portland, everybody's at the bars talking about the latest peer-reviewed study on nose hair. I think that the algorithm is seeing things that we talk about and click on. So my relationship with social media is I use it to write. I do try to be human and authentic on it. I write every morning on the Distance Project. At Physiology First, I talk very openly about our organization, but the goal of all of it is to ultimately create new things. This is only, Facebook and Instagram are just flashes in the pan. Mm-hmm. They're just flashes in the pan. It's all human communication. Something better will come along. For sure. Yeah. We are always asking, how do we remember that we are in the driver's seat of the situation? Because if we're not, we're going to be in the passenger seat and go for a long and crazy ride. Mm-hmm. I like to use the Instagram at Physiology First to get people involved in the university. Mm-hmm. And then I like to talk with them on telephones, meet with them one-on-one on Zoom, write on Slack, and not get caught in some really weird artificial digital relationship. Yeah. That's honestly creates the impression of a community that doesn't exist. Mm. So I use it cautiously and in the hopes that it's only, again, a flash in the pan in terms of what will be the next major way that we connect online. Will that happen through virtual reality? What will be the platform when we look back now, you and I, and think about like MySpace or something, mm-hmm. or like Friendster, and it's gone. Yep. At some point, Instagram will be gone, Facebook will be gone, and we'll have a new way to connect online. And I hope that we can get enough people involved in that conversation. Mm-hmm. The only people in the room should not be tech companies whose only revenue model is attention. Yeah. There probably needs to be a larger conversation on what we think the internet is and how we might want to use this ultra powerful tool. Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah.
What's your own relationship with your own mental health like, and how do you take care of your own mental health on a day-to-day basis? Is that something you struggle with?
No, you know what? I wish it was. It's terrible. It's not what I mean. I don't want to seem like this, like uncharacteristically happy, like, annoyingly happy human. But my relationship with my own mental health is optimal right now because.
Has it always been?
No, it was terrible. That's why we started the organization. Because I didn't understand the physiological prerequisites for mental health. Mm-hmm. I didn't know. So when you don't have an idea that your behaviors will ultimately lead to a perspective, not only a perspective, but a physiological state mm-hmm. that looks depressive, looks prone to anxiety attacks, looks jaded, cynical, dark. I mean, these are the blend of psychology and physiology. When I was drinking myself to sleep, doing drugs, and hanging out with people who hated the world was dark. Mm-hmm. Now I wake up and do breath work, and I run on trails with people who seem to love life, and the world feels bright. Right. And that only inspires me to think that we're a reflection of our physiology. If I was having this conversation with you at mile 73 of a 100-miler, I might be a slightly different person. If I was having this conversation with you after 17 shots of espresso, I'd be different. And if I decided to go on a bender pre-conversation, I haven't drank in 12 years, wouldn't be a good idea. And, you know, drink a fifth of vodka, I'd be a different person. We are a reflection of our physiology. And then we're a reflection of our tribe. So it's almost like my relationship with my mental health is optimal because I work on it 24/7, 24/7. By surrounding myself with people who challenge me and who I feel connected to, and by working to constantly optimize for physiological health, meaning there are times I'd like to have another cup of coffee or times I'd like to do this or that, but I know that there's a ricochet, a ripple effect in that. The body, physiology is objective, you know, so the more that if I don't take care of my body and mind, I'll be likely to feel the response from that. So it's something that I work on constantly, and that's the only reason that it's optimal. If I made different behavioral choices, I would be the reflection of those choices. And that's what we want to show young people, is that when you're in a state that feels depressive, it seems like that state is the true state. It seems like you're seeing the truth in that moment and everything else was false. And that is a point that our mentor Adam Robinson brought up years ago on a podcast. He said the most insidious thing about depression is that from the inside, when you're depressed, it seems like you're seeing the actual clear reality of a dark and empty and isolated and pointless world. And that everything before was a delusion. Because I read so much about the neuroscience of dopamine and serotonin, I understand that these are neurochemical, and there's other elements too. I don't want to take our entire conscious experience and reduce it to a set of chemical reactions. But to understand why we're more prone to feel certain ways when we haven't slept, when we haven't eaten well, when we haven't had social connection, mental exercises, you know, when you don't have the things that you need, the body responds and it prompts behavior. So when I began in my own life looking at physiological reactions as prompts for change and began to better respect the prompt, is when my life changed for the better, because I didn't know that it was a prompt. It felt like a reality.
Yep. You guys have an ultramarathon coming up, right?
Yeah, man, we are really stoked. We have a race for the future. It's a 24-hour race. It's at this beautiful farm called Snowfields Farm in Pownell, Maine. Gorgeous 5K trail loop. And the goal behind the race is to raise some funds for Physiology First.
Okay.
Funding this type of mental health education is incredibly difficult because I feel like we're at a precipice. We're learning more about the human brain and body than we've ever known. And so it makes mental health something you can work to optimize. But without that being the conversation, I think the current conversation when we talk about mental health is not this positive narrative. It's kind of a subversive way of saying mental illness. We're going to talk about mental health. People think anxiety, depression, and isolation. They don't think like, I'm going to optimize my mind and body to be in a more capable position to succeed at things. Right. It's a negative conversation versus a positive. So this race brings together people who see that happening. They see that shift in learning more about our objective physiology and neurology and realizing that we can upgrade the way that we feel. So it's a fundraiser event. People can run virtually. They can run at the farm. They can run a mile or they can run 100. It's a tough course to run 100 on. The actual course is a bear for a 100-miler. But it's July 24th, and we're just so excited to have the event kickoff. We have a 1,000-mile team challenge that we do, so people can contribute miles all over the globe.
Oh.
So they make their morning run and kind of go towards it.
Okay.
And the goal is that it isn't just a run, it's kind of a global conversation about the future, because these are the people who are about to lead it. We want to make sure that we're setting them up to succeed as best as we can.
Cool. I love it. I'd love to support, man. I'd love to be a part of it. It sounds like.
Yeah, we'd love to have you, man. We're going to be out there all night I'm looking for 100K at the race. We're going to have a beautiful fundraising dinner the night before. We actually have Otis Redding III, Otis Redding's son.
No way.
Well, yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Whoa.
Perform at the fundraising dinner the night before at the
Okay.
farm. A really magical weekend of running on the trails and hoping to grow the nonprofit.
Wow. Cool, man. That sounds like fun. It's been a cool conversation, man. What else? Where else can we go? I mean, yeah.
It's so much fun. I was looking forward to this all day. I'm really appreciative to get to know you through this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the work you're doing, man. How can people support you guys?
There's two ways. They can go to physiologyfirst.org.
Okay.
And if people are interested in making a donation to the organization, we're actually building out that student center right now. Big shout out to Yoga Bo Bags from Nashua, New Hampshire. They make these really cool bean bags, and they just donated a couple to us for the teen center.
What are they called?
Yoga Bo. You got to check them out. They're these super rad bean bags.
Okay.
And the kids, a lot of the students were like, wouldn't it be great if we had some Yoga Bo bags? So we sent them a DM on Instagram. And they responded that day, and they sent a few up. So we're awesome. Slowly trying to outfit the center, and donations allow us to do that, and also to push the work forward and to grow the organization. And people can also join Physiology First University. Mm-hmm. This way they can access resources, both mental and physical, and they can help to support the work through their monthly tuition.
Okay.
Well, they can I guess the third way is they can sign up for the race and rock and roll with us in July.
Totally. July 24th, man. I'm in. That sounds like fun.
So glad to have you.
Yes. So is that the best way to support you guys, through Physiology First, or join the race?
It really is. The gym itself is this small, self-sustaining thing at this point. We took a very antithetical model too, from a business perspective, to the gym. We treat it like a cooperative. We treat it like a cooperative where if something's out, toilet paper's out, somebody grabs some. People help out with the place. And so it's its own little thing, and people can follow us on Instagram. We actually started a training program called Endurance Redefined, and it's a very in-depth endurance training program.
Okay.
And anyone who signs up for the race will get it.
Oh.
So kind of as a gift for signing up.
Okay. And what does that involve?
Everything from breathing analysis and breathing assessments to understanding biomechanics of running to thinking about strength training for runners specifically, and not having them be kind of lumped into different strength development groups. So it'll be a 3-month program with both an aerobic capacity component, a strength and conditioning component, tons of injury prevention. Like right now, we're in calf raise city. We're doing all the things we can to bulletproof the calves and Achilles tendon and knees. So they'll get that whole program if they sign up for the race. Breathe to Perform is our consulting company. We work with teams and with companies on understanding the science of how breathing impacts the brain to optimize peak performance.
Okay.
But the way that people can get involved and help is probably through the nonprofit, because that's something that we want to be able to scale a solution that meets the size of the problem. Yes. And in order to do that, we're going to need to be able to put pop-up campuses around the globe. This to us is not a side hobby of something like that we're doing at the gym. Mm-hmm. It is our mission to grow Physiology First into something that really does shape the future of learning, because it's community-based and it's people learning about themselves with others.
Mm. Tell me more about Breathe to Perform. I'm interested.
Breathe to Perform came out of our endurance training initially. We started to look at breathing and the science of the respiration physiology from an aerobic development perspective. We were just kind of geeked on trying to get runners to run more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until we started to look at the neuroscience of breathing in relation to anxiety and stress that caused us to build the company. We were like, in a world where attention, focus, these things are becoming harder and harder. Our attention span is on a downward trajectory right now. A lot of that has to do with the way that we use technology. That seems to be driving more of a sympathetic anxiety sort of ready state among people. The quickest way to downshift your own physiology, the quickest thing that we can do to lower our heart rate, to change our skin temperature, to take control of our body's response to stimulation is breathing. Mm-hmm. But if we could show companies and teams the basic science of how breathing impacts the brain and body, and give them a really practical program, so simple. The Breathe to Perform program is incredibly simple, that we could then give them a tool to leverage their mental and physical state at work, before going to bed, on their run, and then to ultimately tie it into this larger conversation about, optimizing the tools that we have to feel our best and perform at our best. So we started Breathe to Perform. We work with sports teams, we work with universities, we work with school districts at large, and we work with companies who want to understand how to leverage their breath to peak mental and physical performance.
And I'm guessing it's a little bit different for everybody. It's going to be different for the businessman sitting in an office versus an athlete. You know, I read James Nestor's book, and he really promotes the breathing through the nose, which I really appreciate. But I'm also a fan of the Wim Hof style breathing, you know, as far as stress reduction. Are you incorporating all these different styles?
No, we don't at all. You know, we don't at all. It's no disrespect to Wim. We had a chance to work with Wim years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we really focus on a practical approach to breath work or breath education. So what we're looking for, especially as we work with students on this, are what are the subtle changes, the subtle shifts in state that would put you in a position where you could succeed more effectively at a meeting or a presentation. I love what Wim is doing. I think it's really cool, but I definitely wouldn't do Wim Hof breathing before getting on stage. It's the little things, right, that allow us to understand how carbon dioxide and oxygen work in our body.
Mm-hmm.
Use small exercises to, again, lower the heart rate, change the body's response to stress, become more tolerant to carbon dioxide. You know, when I do, we did a fundraising run for Physiology First a couple of years ago where I did a 100-miler on a track. And I was nasal breathing the whole time. This is a 100-mile race. I shouldn't have been unable to maintain nasal breathing. I'm not running 5.5-minute miles here, you know? So to think about aerobic capacity being directly related to our ability to buffer rising carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is what allows us to use oxygen.
Right.
Our athletes at the gym are basically nasal breathing 90% of the time.
Really?
We have athletes who are going to be part of the race training program.
Mm-hmm.
They're really going to build that aerobic base by utilizing nasal breathing in the majority of their running.
What? Really?
And, you know, almost all of it. And depending on who they are and what they're doing, you know, this is where it does get individualized. If you start out in 50-miler and you're trying to chase somebody up the hill, do what you got to do. If you're jockeying for a position that you think you can maintain, we're not dogmatic about it, but just the idea that I should be able to maintain nasal breathing to 80% of my max heart rate. Mm-hmm. Well, why am I going beyond that in the first quarter of any race? You know, why am I putting myself in a position that I'm going to have to recover from the physiological load of? Because as soon as I start breathing through the mouth, I'm blowing off the carbon dioxide that lets me effectively use oxygen. Mm-hmm. Now I'm in all this ambiguous territory of I'm gassed, I'm winded, I'm whatever word I use for not being able to effectively get oxygen from my blood to my muscles. Mm-hmm. So the sports stuff's actually kind of is easier. It's getting the athlete to understand that, or I say the athlete, the businessman, the student, that we're more interested in addressing underlying breathing dysfunction. I don't like hacks per se. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's breathing through their mouth at their desk, writing a paper, that's a whole lot of carbon dioxide out. Yep. That's going to affect how they take oxygen in. That's going to increase sympathetic nervous system tone in their body. They're more likely to feel a little bit agitated, stressed, and irritable as that becomes a pervasive breathing habit. And if we can just get them to maintain nasal breathing through most of their day, like in a car or at a desk, and teach them a couple of techniques. Actually, I'll show you one right now, but a couple of techniques that they might use on the spot. I'd much rather take that approach and say, we're going to optimize to identify and address dysfunction that could be making you feel anxious, irritable, and exhausted, versus letting that train run and then giving you a bunch of exercise hacks to offset it. So it's more about people understanding the benefits of nasal breathing, understanding what happens when we're over breathing, linking breathing to exhaustion, stress, anxiety, sleeplessness. Mm-hmm. And then a strategy we might give somebody, like this is from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who we got to go visit at Stanford University a couple of years ago. And it's a great example of how much this is just pure physiology. So right now, if you close your mouth, mm-hmm. take an inhale through the nose, and take an inhale on top of that one. I'm going to take a nice easy exhale through the mouth. And we'll do that 2 more times. I'm going to close my mouth. I'm going to inhale through the nose. Inhale on top of that one. Easy exhale through the mouth. One last time. Inhale through the nose. Inhale on top of that one. And last time, really gentle, easy exhale through the mouth. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to be an exercise that puts them in a slightly different state, maybe a little more relaxed, maybe a little more focused, because all that they did is collect a little bit of extra carbon dioxide. And they reinflated alveolar sacs in the lungs that may have been flattened. Yep. And then they offloaded the carbon dioxide in a really slow stream. So if that's something that made the person feel relaxed because they just did a simple mechanical action to collect some CO2 and blow it off in a slow stream, and they can use that if they say, I'm getting ready to go on stage right now and I feel nervous. I have a job interview or an investor pitch. I'm about to walk through the door and my heart rate's up.
Yeah.
Somebody cut me off in traffic and flipped me the bird and I want to chase them down 3 exits. If I can take control of my physiological reaction through something like a simple breathing exercise, it's almost like clearing the windshield in a blizzard. It's just a way to say, I want to be able to see where I'm going again. So that's why we emphasize it. It's so short and simple. You can make a pretty good, you can make a pretty big dent in your own emotional reactivity if you can kind of control that raw physiological response that happens when we get upset.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Is there certain breathing exercises that you do every day? You said you practice some breathing in the morning. What do you do first thing?
We're on a subject right now.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You know what? No, I don't do it every day, but I will share breathing exercises that I do at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay.
And it gives me kind of a sense of where my body is at. It's a way to kind of read my own physiological state. So what I'll do is I'll find a comfortable position to sit in. I'll close my mouth. I'll take a 4-second inhale and I'll take a 6-second exhale.
Okay.
Then I'll take a 6-second inhale and an 8-second exhale. I'll move it up to 8 in, 10 out, 10 in, 12 out. It's a breathing ladder that we developed. Okay. And I'd like to be able to get to 18 in, 20 out pretty effortlessly. If I can't, if my tolerance to carbon dioxide is lower, if that's normally easy for me, but it's not easy today, that's an interesting piece of data to have. You know, it doesn't change in the way that I'm going to go about my day. But if I also realize that I slept really poorly last night, that I got home from the gym really late and had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for dinner instead of like what I normally eat, and my CO2 tolerance is a little bit off, and maybe my mood is off a little bit, this is probably good stuff to know before heading into a day of business. You know, it's just a little bit of a glimpse into that physiological reflection.
So it's telling you, it's like telling you where you're maybe you're a little stressed out, or you didn't get enough sleep.
Maybe a little bit less tolerant to carbon dioxide, the more stressed or anxious that you are. The more that my sleep is off, nutrition's off, anything else is off, the more that's just sort of a physiological gauge rather than looking at a watch to tell me if I'm stressed or looking at my ring to tell me if I'm stressed. Right. I probably want to just take that into account. Okay. And it's also, it also for me is a great exercise in being able to practice expansion where I'm normally sort of compressed. Yep. We talk with our athletes a lot about rib cage shape and how that's influenced by breathing, and how we breathe also influences the rib cage. So my partner Lex, for example, rib cage is very much flat from front to back. Her breathing is very much lateral by nature. And I'm going to pick strength and conditioning exercises that don't flatten and compress her where she's already compressed.
Oh, interesting.
Or breathe into the front of the rib cage and the back of the rib cage and expand where she's sort of smushed.
Oh, okay.
And I'm still the opposite. So when I'm practicing this breath work as a warm-up for my workout, I'm raising carbon dioxide levels in the body. I'm bringing my own heart rate up a little bit. And I'm also practicing the way that I'd like to breathe when I'm now approaching my squat or my run, or I'm on a bike. So that's an exercise I try to put into most of my training sessions, although I forget a couple times a week. So maybe 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay. I'm curious about the nasal breathing while running. What are some pointers you have for me, and what are some of the first steps I can take to sort of work towards that?
The first thing I would say is, if you put a barrier between, I'm going to either prioritize nasal breathing and aerobic development and flow. And what I mean by that is I want to maybe listen to a podcast, maybe I'm just looking at the woods. And if I want to develop my aerobic capacity, maybe I start to push that. But I think people go in that direction too early, too fast. Right. They're redlining it. Snot's coming out of their mouth. They're like, this is freaking terrible. Run at a pace that you can comfortably breathe through your nose. even if it's nowhere near your normal running pace, because soon it will be. And then that will start to feel effortless. So people, I think the initial mistake is if you normally, I'm just going to make this up, if you normally head out of your driveway running a 7-minute mile and you're breathing through your mouth, and you try to replicate that through your nose, and there's snot dripping and you're having a panic attack because you can't breathe, and it turns out that you have to run a 9:30 or a 10-minute mile to comfortably breathe through your nose. Let that be a period of aerobic development in your training season, and watch how you can now run a 9-minute mile breathing easily through the nose, an 8:45, at 8:30. When you can actually speed out and hit that 7-minute mile nasal only, you're a more aerobically efficient athlete. And the only way to get there was to go there. If you decide to do that for the first time in your key race of the year, you're going to hate this advice. I was gunning for the podium, and you were looking at a training year and saying, okay, there's a build-up phase. This is connective tissue, tendons, joint health, aerobic development. Then you have this training phase, this peak training phase, competitive phase, and then a recovery phase or a shift phase, which phase where we're going from active competition to planning the next year, and giving ourselves a break mentally and physically so we can clearly see what's going to be an amazing year. I signed up for some races just out of that pure post-race, I got to get back on ultra sign up, and then thought, am I really excited about this run? I want to pick a couple of things that I'm like, oh, I can't stop thinking about it. Right. So the advice I would give is make it easy for yourself. You can pick 2 days a week where you say, I am all about aerobic development. Okay. All I care about is breathing comfortably through my nose, and you can watch your own heart rate on that. And when you can run faster with a reduced heart rate, breathing easily through your nose, you've made aerobic adaptations that are really hard to get from anywhere else. And then you get stronger, and then you build the skill a little bit, and now you're actually improving your running while being able to really tune into how your body's using energy. When we start to think about nasal breathing and the ability to use more fat than more sugar, now you're not the person having 17 goos by mile 30 of 100K, and going, man, my stomach's kind of messed up because I don't normally eat vanilla goo for breakfast. It's like, you're going to be able to use fat more as a fuel source. So there's the whole other side of how you breathe is how your body attacks energy stores or uses them.
How long is that adaptation process? Does it happen pretty quickly?
It's different for everybody. So we have a program, not here to hawk it or anything, but we do have a program called Catch Your Breath, the runner's guide to beating breathlessness and unlocking their inner athlete. It's $20. It's on our site at breathetoperform.com, and it takes you through the whole process. For most people, it's 2 weeks to 3 weeks, where they're going through some runny nose stuff. They're feeling like almost everybody tries to go too fast with it. Again, meaning maintain too fast a pace. Right. Pick a couple of days a week where this is you developing an aerobic capacity that's going to be very hard for any competitor to match if they're constantly breathing through their mouth at slow, easy distances. And if you're actually going to try to gun it on the track and it's a speed workout, don't conflate the two things. You'll find that you can maintain nasal breathing at higher workloads, and you can maintain. I'll give you an exercise right now to try, and it's not comfortable at all. But if you're when I say if you're in running shape, what I mean is sprinting a good idea for you right now? Because when I've done a lot of slower endurance stuff, hitting a track immediately was not the best idea. My tendons weren't ready for that. Yep. If you're already sprinting, a workout that I like a lot, that is part of our Breathe to Perform program, is 5 by 100 meter sprints with 10 seconds rest in between. I'm going to hit a 100-meter sprint. I've warmed up for this. Hit a 100-meter sprint, all nasal, come back and block it. Now, whatever that number was, however long it took you to hit that first 100, give yourself 10 seconds and work to repeat that time. Keep it nasal. The goal is to be able to get through that for 5 sprints. Now, it's immensely hard. And what we tell the athletes is for this exercise, only for this training drill, prioritize nasal breathing over the splits. So if you ran it and then you said, oh my God, I'm down 5 seconds, I'm down 7 seconds, my 5th one is 10 seconds slower than my first, and then in a month, you can match all those times, that's an awesome sign of progress for the athlete. They go, wait a minute, I couldn't do that, now I can do that. And it also shows them how damn hard they can work with nasal breathing. So it seems like I just gave 2 conflicting pieces of advice, and that make it easy, use it on your easy runs. And if you want a benchmark test, figure that out about yourself. and say, wow, wait a minute, I can now maintain the same, that first split at 90% of max heart rate, gunning it. And I couldn't do it a month ago. That's a great confidence booster, especially when you're actually trying to throw the hammer down in a race and you think you need to breathe through your mouth to do it. You'll know from your own data that you're not even close. Wow. So there's that's a fun one, and you can definitely get some good data for yourself. And then again, it's almost like watching a weight go up in a gym.
Yeah,
if you
totally.
Pull up last month and you can do 3 pull-ups, you're happy because you saw something change. It's a cool shot.
I'm going to try it, and I'm probably going to hate you for a couple minutes there, but I'm going to try it.
Ways to approach it, it's up to you.
Yeah.
One way to approach it is that you can breathe through your mouth on the 10-second rests. I encourage people not to do that.
Okay.
I encourage people to stay nasal on the 100-meter sprint, come back. It'll also teach you immediately what a full inhale is, because we put you in a position where you really have to utilize those couple of inhalations, and you'll say, I've never felt my rib cage expand so much before. I'm going, like, oh my God, it's like I'm now 3D. I was almost like a cardboard cutout, and now I'm like 3D. You'll learn how to access your full lung capacity. It's a hard workout, but once you can do it, get some data, and then replicate it, it's just, it's something to be proud of, to say, wow, I did that. Now can I take that and can I start to practice some of the speed elements that may be part of your endurance training program? But the difference is, here's an analogy that you might appreciate from the business world. So I'm a big fan of Airbnb's initial, just sort of the way that they solved a problem and they created, maybe they created more. I'm not here to, to diss on Airbnb, but just the idea that they had this beautiful analogy where they talked about the 11-star experience. And they said, when we first started the Airbnb company, we had like a couple of users and they were in New York. And they had a mentor, which is part of Y Combinator, who said, well, like, if your users are in New York, why the hell are you in like LA? Like, go fly out there, knock on their doors and figure out what they like about Airbnb, what they don't like. Talk to your users. And so they have these conversations, they get this great information. And here's what came out of it, was this idea of the 11-star experience. They said, what would be a 1-star experience at Airbnb? You get there, the grass is overgrown, there's a rusty lawnmower out front, and some guy with a gun chases you off the lawn. That's not good, right? What is a 3-star experience? You got there and it worked. The place wasn't bad. And like, no one cares about 3-star experiences in life. You don't tell anybody about it, it just worked. That's not that cool. It just wasn't terrible. What would be a 5-star experience? You get there and there's a tuned guitar on the bed because they knew that you were a guitar player. And there's maybe a reservation to the hippest restaurant in town that's hard to get into. It's there for you. You're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And if you run the thought exercise up to this like 9-star experience, you get there and the entire community's cheering on the front lawn and welcoming you to the Airbnb, and it's epic and amazing. You get to the 11-star and you get there and like Elon Musk like takes you to Mars. The cool thing, right? You're like, oh my God, it's amazing. The cool thing is you never go back to 3. You just never, in your own business practices, 3 is never good enough. If you've gone to Mars in your mind, you're at least putting a mint on the pillow. You're at least putting a surfboard in the room because the person surfs, and now people talk about what you do. So the reason I brought that up is if you're gunning 100-meter sprints, 90% max heart rate, battling it out, the next time that you're running easily on a mountain trail doing a 20-miler, you'll breathe through your nose just based on the fact that it's nothing like that was. You'll be like, you'd have an archetype now to say, well, wait a minute, why would I breathe through my mouth if I'm running at a trail pace, like a long distance pace for myself? You've changed your own breathing by setting a different standard for actually how hard you can go.
Yeah, it's like a high water mark.
It's a high water mark. Like I was able to maintain this pace and this heart rate breathing through my nose. I'm nowhere near that now. I'm just running some loping downhills on a trail on a big run by myself. Yeah. It becomes natural to breathe through the nose. It doesn't feel forced after that.
Okay, cool, man. I'm all over it.
If you need any help on that, dude, send us a note anytime. It's kind of what we do. Okay. We'd be happy to help you build an aerobic program based on optimizing breathing anytime.
Okay, awesome. And great for listeners too. I'm sure people are going to reach out.
Anytime. We'd love to answer questions. You can DM us and just hit us up anytime with breathing questions.
What's the best way to do that? Is it just through social media or through your website?
You know what? Yeah, you know what? You can go to @breathe to perform on Instagram and send us a DM.
Oh,
or you can go to the breathetoperformprogram.com.
okay.
I have a book on the subject. It's a really short book.
Cool.
Find that there, and we try to keep the stuff pretty simple.
Awesome. All good stuff, man. I'm sure you're familiar with the jiu-jitsu goat, Marcelo Garcia. I remember watching that.
Yes, man.
I remember watching that guy roll.
Wow, yeah.
Always breathing through his nose. Did you ever notice that?
Here you go.
Oh my
That's
God.
it.
Yeah. You watch all of his stuff. He's just always breathing through his nose. And I just thought, how is that even possible? You know?
He is, you know, what's so funny is I seem to bring up Marcelo Garcia on like podcasts, and this is the first time it's been the opposite.
Oh, nice.
Marcelo Garcia is amazing, and he has this amazing lesson in his training where he's training for the World Championship Jiu-Jitsu, and he would put his training up on like YouTube and be like, oh, "This is what I'm doing. I'm going to do this to you then."
Yeah.
And people are like, "Why are you doing that? Like, training is supposed to be this top secret thing. Why are you showing people what you're doing?" And he's like, "Well, if you're watching what I'm doing, you're playing my game. I'm going to be better at it. I'm not watching what other people are doing."
Right.
And I think that there's a really great lesson in that in the social media sphere where we compare ourselves to others, and there's these weird arguments in the running community and the sport community that, you know, if you're really on your grind and you're really working to push yourself to the limits, you're watching the path ahead, your training system, you're not easily distracted, and you're after it. I thought Marcelo was an amazing example of that by saying,
That's
"Look,
true.
yeah, he's a goat for real."
He really is, man. You mentioned you have a podcast. What's the name of it?
I don't have a podcast.
Oh, I thought you said you did.
I have a book out called Breathe to Perform.
Oh, that's your book.
Yeah, Breathe to Perform is out. You can get it on ebook. I actually have an updated version coming out this month along with the audiobook version.
Okay.
So that'll all be out on the website. And it's
sweet.
The goal was to create one of the simplest books on breathing imaginable. So it has the new version has some anecdotes from running and stuff. The first one didn't. But the goal was like, how can we not convolute or complicate this? Because once you optimize your breathing, there's all the other things. You know, it's easy in our social media sphere right now, especially in the fitness world, to be told to find a niche. Find a niche, the thing that you talk about. I think there's an inherent problem in that because you'll over-determine the value of the thing. Mm-hmm. You'll apply it as a hammer to screws all over you. Optimizing breathing, I think, is one of the most important things we can do. I think from a pressure management standpoint of the body, I'm incredibly interested in this relationship between the pelvic and thoracic diaphragm. Because if I have a runner whose one hip is shifted forward, her thorax is now shifted to the left so that she can point her head and run straight, and she keeps running into injuries, she's going to have to learn to breathe from the inside, to stretch herself from the inside. The typical advice would be to foam roll her hamstring or do lateral band walks, but she needs to reorient the position of the axial skeleton, and that has to happen through respiration. That's like a tire blowing itself up, right? That flat spot's going to be there. You can rub it with a foam roller or beat it with a lacrosse ball. But when we inflate, we change the pressure management system of the body. We have organs and gases and pressures. And that piston-like system of the thoracic and pelvic diaphragm is how we manage pressure. So that's really important. The way that we use oxygen is extremely important because that's our energy. But once you get a couple of basic principles on that, it's like there's just so much to build off of that foundation. So we wrote a simple book on purpose because I think that those 4 principles, we have breath awareness, breath control, breath training, and breath practice. If you can kind of master those 4 concepts, you find that it doesn't take doing anything that you're not already doing. It's just a little more awareness about breathing. Okay. And I think that's kind of the Pareto's principle 80-20 distribution of, wow, I feel a lot better. Energy's higher, anxiety's lower, I'm running faster from doing a couple of things consistently versus doing a million things all at once.
Right. Wow. I'm all over it, man. I'm looking forward to it. I want to dig in. I'm super interested in this stuff. And yeah, it's fantastic. Dude, this has been awesome. You're going to be hearing from me. You're going to be hearing a lot of questions in the middle of the night. Like, dude.
About that. I think this is even the same thing we were talking about earlier, where like when you can meet cool people through these opportunities and like build relationships, like, you know, it'd be nice to, if you're ever in the area, like hit the White Mountains up here, which are our favorite trail running grounds. just go for a long run, keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Well, same goes both ways, man. You come out to Colorado and we'll make it happen. And how do you know Brian Pacenti?
You know, the trail running world, and I'm actually trying to remember. I cannot remember. I feel terrible. I can't remember if we ran the Bigfoot 200 together.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember if we ran it together. I met him around that time, but I don't remember. I almost feel like we met online after the fact.
Okay.
Could be wrong about that. That whole experience, an 88-hour run, there's many things I don't remember with utmost clarity, but I do remember that race course was amazing. I'd recommend Candace Burt and Destination Trails and Bigfoot 200 to anybody.
Oh, they're all dream races. I mean, yeah, we barely even got into your ultra running experience, and I knew you had done a 200, and we didn't even talk about it. So
I'd recommend
to be continued. Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. Well, we'll have to do this again sometime. I mean, it was a fascinating conversation. I learned a lot, and I'm going to be digging into Breathe to Perform. So I can't wait, man.
So appreciate that, man. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And not only to do our work, but to connect with you. This was awesome.
Dude, it was awesome. And just keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiring people, man. You are, you're changing lives, you know, even maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, but it sounds like you're out there doing big things, and I appreciate it, man. So just keep on this path.
Brother, I really appreciate you and everything you're doing. Thank you so much for having me on.
For sure. Thank you, David. Appreciate you, man. Have a good one.